ZeBirdBrain, and today we are talking about rigging. So, this is one of the most commonly asked questions about Harmony, or just 2D rigging in general. How do you do IKFK in 2D? Short answer is you don't. Long answer is you kinda do, but not quite. So IKFK in 3D is much easier than in 2D because in 3D you actually have a 3D puppet to rotate and kind of play with. In 2D you don't because, you know, it's 2-dimension. It's all illusion and lies and stuff. So you can get kind of something that looks like it, but it will be very limited. In my case, I love to use IKFK, which I will stop using IKFK. In Harmony, we call those constraints. If you go to your node library and you write constraints, you're gonna find these little things. 2-point constraints, 3-point constraints, multi-point constraints, and the constraint switch. There are some other nodes in the same family, but basically these are the main ones, and that's what I'm gonna refer to. I'm not gonna talk about that thing. That thing is broken, just don't look at it. I'm sorry, you were great, but now you're not. So constraints is where it's at. So constraints are great because they allow you to do some things like this. And squash things up and move them, and it's really great. Constraints are amazing for one specific thing. They're gonna be great if you have a very flat style where you don't have to get your characters running and doing 360 jumps and all that. I mean, it might be great, but it's usually a bit harder to do. Like if you look at Tangled or Hilda and stuff, like they don't use constraints. They use pegs and deformers and whatnot. But constraints can be useful if you put them like on the whole rig to give them some bounce. I know some very high-end amazing productions use constraints to do easy take or easy anticipation or just to stretch and squash their whole rig for some little things. So constraints are great to do quick and easy jobs. It's not something that you're gonna work to do crazy hand-drawn like cutout animation. Okay, so now that we know what it's not for, let me tell you what it is for. Renee and I do most of our Game Grumps animation nowadays with these crab rigs because they're just so fast to animate. If I want to have Aaron react to something, I can be like, whoa, and it's very great. But they're usually gonna stay either in that shape or like maybe have something more of a front view. But it's always gonna work really well because it's very flat and very cartoony and fun and cutout-ish. So this is where constraints win. When it's something that you want to do quick and dirty in a very flat look. So now let me show you how to make it. It's super easy and I hope you're gonna enjoy it. So instead of using my crab rigs, which are great, but would be a bit too long to explain to you today how to make it, I will use my little crown. Ta-da! So I made this little crown and I can move it around with my constraints. So if I move the bottom here and then I move the top, the bottom is going to stay in place and then I can kind of have it bounce around like that. Woo! So it's really fun. So if you're trying to do something that bounces, it's super easy to just do kind of an elastic motion and then drop it like that. So that's where constraints really shine. They're great. So now let's build it together. All you need is one drawing. I have my little crown here. And basically a constraint is just a way to connect multiple pegs to the same drawing. So I'm gonna go here, get my 2-point constraints, insert it here, and then you have 3 output here. This is for the constraint switch. We're not gonna cover it today. We're just gonna focus on the left peg and the right peg. So for that, I'm gonna create 2 pegs. The shortcut to create a peg is Ctrl-P or Command-P on a Mac. I'm gonna connect them here. And for the purpose of this video, I'm gonna rename them as top and butt. For top and bottom. So now I just have to take this peg and place the pivot at the top, and then take the bottom peg and place the pivot at the bottom. So that now I have 1 top peg and 1 bottom peg. So basically you're gonna have 2 pegs controlling the same drawing. So if this peg is here and this one is there, if I move the top one, the bottom one is gonna stay in place. And this is how you get that kind of IKFK feeling. Okay, so it's not exactly the same as 3D, it's a different kind of IKFK, but it's still very great, it's amazing. And then you can just unite these on the same peg, and this would be like my crown. So I use this to move my crown around, but then if I want to move this, then I can move these pegs like this. So when and where to use constraints, like I said, for a style that is much more like 2D, very shapey, cutout-y, it's going to be very great to put on your characters to make them bounce. But even on more high-end, complex show and stuff, I see it used for hair a lot. Like if your character has hair behind their head, it's very easy to just give constraints to this hair. So constraints are great if you're using them on like either parts or your whole character to kind of squish them and stuff. And it's great for individual pieces that you want to have a kind of squash and stretch to them. What I would not use constraints for usually is for like legs and arms, just because that when you use these pegs into this constraint module, if you take it and you try to rotate it, it doesn't work. So when you put those into limbs like legs and arms, it's just really not natural and animators are going to struggle with it. It's not great. Unless you're doing like a little short PSA or something and you just want your character to stay static and move its legs a little bit, that's going to work. But usually, I wouldn't use it for limbs. That's just me. Another thing that is problematic with constraints is that if my crown had line work, I'm just going to do a quick line work here for my crown. If my crown had a line work, when you use the constraints, it's going to mess up your line work a lot in terms of sizes, and it's going to stretch it and stuff. I saw the Empress rig some months ago, I think. When the pieces were moved, the line weight was shifted and moving around a lot, and it was not great for that part. So if you have something with very line-specific weight, I wouldn't go use constraint that much because it's going to make your job a bit more complex. Especially if you compare this to like deformers, where deformers are usually going to be much more reliable in terms of line weight. Like this, if I move my piece, the line weight is going to be much more stable than with a constraint. Alright, and now have a nice week, and I'll see you again next week. Bye bye!